For this session number 9 of Challenging New Testament Scholarship, I thought I'd rearrange the studio and have a session on structure. It's prompted, I suppose, by the previous 2 sessions. The last one we were looking at the Revelation, here behind me, and before that we were looking at John's Gospel, which sits behind the chart of the Revelation. Both of them were arranged to a menorrhachic arrangement. Sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 were by 1 and 7 in John's Gospel related in various ways, but significantly Jesus is the Lamb of God. And then the I am sayings contained in the middle 5 sections, the first and last being I am the bread of life, I am the true vine, and between them I am the light of the world, and I am the way, the truth and the life. And in the middle I am the gate, the good shepherd, I am the resurrection and the life. The arrangement is clearly helping me recall, because it's helped me memorise. It's a tool that we could say is mnemonic. In terms of the Revelation, it works out as 7 letters that correspond to the 7 final visions, 7 seals on the book of life that correspond in various ways to the 7 words of condemnation and judgment, 7 angels with their trumpets, following them are the 7 angels with their bows. Each of the 7s mirrors each other around a central set or section, a set of 7, where in the opening scene we're in heaven, the Ark of the Covenant is there, and we come across very significant teachings around which all the others relate or rotate or balance. So in both John's Gospel and the Revelation to John, we have a helpful symbol here, surely. It's more than a structure and an arrangement. It is a symbol of something beyond the numbers. And what we have to catch up on in New Testament studies today, surely, is that numbers meant things to the first century Christian world. And it's the meanings of those numbers that are incorporated. So we said with the Revelation, 7 times 7 is the scheme. It means everything will be brought to fulfillment in a perfect way. God will see that that happens. The great spiritual forces that are at work and beyond our imagining are going to be sorted. God's doing that. We were afraid before perhaps of holding on to teachings of the devil and teachings about the Antichrist, that this book faces those head on and says ultimately that the church has a duty and a responsibility to God for establishing his rule in the world, but he has the responsibility and the authority and the power to sort things out that we cannot. All things will come to their full fruition with the dealing with evil and the forces of evil. That's God's business, and the establishing of good in the world and in the life to come, in which we have a real part to play. So we're not talking about numbers alone, and we'll have a session on numbers. We are talking about structure and format. What helped me a long time ago was Burton L. Mack's book, rhetoric in the New Testament. I refer to this severally in my own publications, but especially in this one, New Testament, New Testimony to the Skills of the Writers and First Readers. You can get the up-to-date version of this on a website, New Testament, New Testimony, or you can go into my website, davidgpalmer.co.uk, and see about buying this copy, the 5th edition, the illustrated exhibition edition of this book, which shows the table, not this table as such, because this is more recent. This is the rhetorical table of the texts of the New Testament in the order of their writing. And I put the 7 letters of Paul that most scholars would agree were earliest in the writings, 50 to 64. I'm very much closer to including Ephesians and Colossians in that first batch, for good reason, but beyond that required for this session. The Gospels of Mark, Matthew and Luke and Acts, I think, came in the next session, 70 to 79, I can argue, because of similarities. In fact, we could go there now, for with Matthew, what we find are 11 sections. I don't think you can read this. You need to download the rhetorical table that's on my website, davidgpalmer.co.uk. Download it and revisit this session. It may help. But if the Revelation and John are established as 7 section documents, now we have to take account of the fact that we have Matthew, Luke and Acts all adding more sections, but presenting their material in an 11-part chiasm, where you have a centre and 5 sections in and 5 sections out, each one at each turn corresponding. Now, this may be blowing your mind if you haven't read my work on Matthew, Luke and Acts before now, but clearly this kind of symbolism is helping us see in images what is put down on the paper or on the vellum, if you like. What we have and are beginning to share, we have several structures, and I might as well carry on sharing them. So we have a 7, we have an 11 structure, and we also have a 5. So it's as though these are blocked off. I can't break this, and I'm not going to. 1, 2, C2, 1. And for this we have 2 or 3 examples. We have Paul's letter to the Romans, 1, 2, C2, 1. And Hebrews is I'm also suggesting, arranged that way. And that would be it of the Romans and Hebrews. I thought 1 Timothy, let's see. It used to be, but I now see 1 Timothy as an ABB prime X, ABB prime X, ABB prime. Another 7 branches, but emphatically, as with 3 John, also John, Galatians, and 1 and 2 Corinthians. 7-sectioned books. We also have other samples of we've got the 1, 2, C2, 1, and we've also got ABBA. So how can we show that on here? Drop this, drop that, A, B, B prime, A prime. I don't know, maybe that's hard for you to visualise. but it corresponds in the same way to balancing. And all Greek works had their balance, reflections of one half to another and one section to another. Rhetoric in the New Testament, Matt tells us, shows that there is a discipline to the writing in the first centuries BC and AD. He talks about the purpose of writing, then the arrangement of writing. So classic handbooks, he says, follow these principles, 5 principles. Invention, in other words, you think about what it is you've got to say and want to say. Then you think about arrangement, how you might say what you want to say. Particularly under that, he says, work of ordering this material into an outline. Skeletal outlines for the several types were standard. Skeletal outlines help to get the arrangement of materials started for a given composition, but writers were expected to hide the standard outline when crafting a speech and to produce a composition that would appear to unfold naturally. Arrangement was important and as creative a process as invention in marshalling the ideas. I think that shares a little bit. He himself, I'm sure, would be saved his blushes because he refers to the work of others before him. So each in turn we help the other. He mentions the new rhetoric by Chaim Perelman and L. Albrecht's Typedecker. You might look that book up. He says it's a very good resource on the study of rhetoric. And the 5 rules, the other 3 rules are to do with after arrangement style, in how you configure, work with the syntax, selection of words, repetition of words, dualities in the text, linking one thought with another. Clarity was very definitely mentioned as all important. After style, it was memory and performance. Always thinking about your provision for your reader, the helps they needed to convey your thoughts, that you're giving arrangement to structure and style, skeleton, and giving good style to, so that a reader can be certain of their adding punctuation to the text, which has none other than what they give it, but by being led to the syntax of the style. Memory is much aided by structure and style, but so too is delivery, performance. There's a wonderful piece in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 13, where you get to the third of 3 stanzas, and it has to be read, love never fails. There's an emphatic reading to be read in that way, or recital. But we'll cover 1 Corinthians 13 in some future moment. So we have structures and we're identifying them in the New Testament, and for some reason Burton Mack himself didn't identify them. He got more into Cryer. His interest was in other things and not the classical rules. And all my work, I think, shows that the New Testament Greek texts are works of a classical kind, a classical Greek kind. So we have structures that are 7-sectioned, 11-sectioned, 5-sectioned, and that one's 4-sectioned, then A, B, B prime, A prime, 2-section, A prime. It's interesting that there's in 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians, in pages 83 and 84 of my book, New Testament, 5th edition, it shows that the composition is simply A prime, just two sections where one is setting up and the other says, chapter 4 verse 1 in 1 Thessalonians, for the rest, therefore brothers. Now, I parsed this in my time in the north of Sri Lanka, in Jaffna, under curfew in the evenings. I think this one took me less than an hour. And 2 Thessalonians, I've made a note here, 21st of November 2003, possibly only half an hour to parse the texts. And I'd done both without realising that they'd parsed, exposing the word brothers, adelphoi, at the beginning of how many of the lines of it's worth waiting for. It will be seen the two. Is it over the page? 14 out of 18 parts. There are 3 parts, 3 parts, 3 parts, 3 parts, 3 parts, 3 parts to these 2 sections. A section is A, B, B prime. Each is equatable to A, B, B prime, A, B, B prime, A, B, B prime. 3-part writing style. The style exposes the limits of the section, but what helps is that 14 out of the 18 all begin with the word adelphoi, brothers. And over the page in 2 Thessalonians, it's A prime again, but making up these sections, A prime and A prime. So the style is A, B, B prime, A, B, B prime. It's what we have with Luke in his prologue, chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. 3 lines setting up the first half of the prologue, 3 lines completing the whole of the prologue, an A prime sectionalised prologue, if you like. And 7 out of the 12 of these parts begin with the word brothers. So there's kind of confirmation within the text. That came in the second read, when having a look to check the parsing at what had happened. Well, of course, now you can look at a text, or because of that I was able to look at a text and say, well, whenever I find the word brothers, I must consider that that's the beginning of a new piece, or a new part, or even a new section in any of the texts. So there is something that links all these texts together in the way that the books and letters are written, that they have structure and style. But of the structures, we were summarising structures today, 7 parts, 7 sections, or 11 sections, or 5 sections, 4 sections, or 2 sections, this A prime. It works in the lower pieces as well. There's a very interesting piece in Colossians 1:15 to 20. Lots of people have had a go at presenting it, and they've broken it up all differently from each other. Most would agree that the original hymn was constructed in 2 strophes, but it's not in 2 strophes. It's in A, B, B prime, A prime. So the first, chapter 1, verse 15, he who is an image of God the invisible, and the parallel part is he who is a beginning. The next line, firstborn of all creation, and the next line here, firstborn from the dead, because in him. So there's a 3-part opening and a 3-part closing, and in the middle, and he is before all things, and the balancing part, and he is the head of the body. So in the middle, and he is before all things, and all things in him consisted, and he is the head of the body, the church. But that structure, but its style that's showing that it uses the same kind of structure that we find in the bigger gaze, taking in the full construction of a whole text. Now I'm very happy to say that of all my what should I say, gifts to Wikipedia, I have one left in the text. I think it's 2 Thessalonians. I might be wrong. It might be in 1 Thessalonians, but in 2 Thessalonians, I think it is 2 Thessalonians. The first section begins, "Thanks to God always, brothers," and the second section is, "Thanks to God always, brothers." So chapter 1 verse 3 and chapter 2 verse 30, and that's a dualism, a duality that hasn't been picked up by commentators. So first half begins the same way as the second half. That is in Wikipedia, so somebody likes me enough to leave that in. But whenever I've put anything to do with structure in the Gospels, I've had to fight for a place. And then I had it from a zealous editor of some texts, when I've tried to put in even to some of the letters like Romans or Hebrews. My contribution has been rejected, and I pressed to get an understanding of why, and it was because they've never acknowledged any of my books, to be other than self-promotion, because I published them myself. The reason for self-publishing is that I got so frustrated trying to find a publisher. Once I'd published my first book in 1988, it was so much easier to publish my next book in 1999. And then easier again to publish my later books. But they're viewed, and sometimes by the British New Testament Society, as self-promotion. Old scholarship does have a problem at making available new scholarship to itself by taking this attitude that anybody who does things differently is self-promoting. All I have ever want to do is to share what I've found as quickly as possible, and that goes right back to the beginning of my story in Jaffna, when after my work on the books of the New Testament, I then caught sight of a work that was waiting for me to do on the letters, and tackling them then I was so upset that I had not tackled them 10 years or even 15 years earlier than then. But to get published, what do you first have to do? You have to fill in forms, get a literary agent, and the form requires that you tell which is the institution to which you belong, for which you work, and in what capacity. But my calling was ever in Methodist ministry, what we call circuit ministry, itinerancy. I have served in London, Wales, Scotland, Sri Lanka, Leicester, and now from the Midlands as a supernumerary. In retirement, there's no such thing, but in continuing ministry. Well, there is no access for the likes of me, who has new information. I'm a non-conformist minister, and certainly when my first version of this book came out after my successful PhD on the Markan matrix, the writer said at the end, in one of the JNT, I think it is April 2001, New Testament Studies journal, Palmer shows great scholarship, but sadly it cuts across the currents and consensuses of scholarship in Markham scholarship today. They're nearly the words, but sadly is the word. And my work, yes, it does cut across the currents and consensuses in Wikipedia scholarship. So it's not in Wikipedia that you will find developments, but only tested developments of 50 years ago. No progress on the structure and understanding of that in the books of the New Testament as yet. So maybe this little session on structure in this presentation number 9 of challenging scholarship will have its effect. That's why I'm sitting here and doing this now with these things around me. That's what I hope will happen, yes, and that's why we're doing this. So I hope you will have benefited from it, and join me for session 10, when I will share what I've got on Matthew's, the structure of Matthew's, 11 sections. And once we've studied Luke's and Acts 11 sections, we'll have to spend a bit more time on Numbers as they relate to structure and revelation of the writer's intended. Okay, so join me for sessions 10 and 11, and after that 12 for Numbers in a few days' time. Thank you.